First off, I just want to say thank you for coming this morning. I know it's even harder to get here to an earlier meeting than the regular meeting. And that's, that shows a lot of support. The first thing I want to say, it is something which is interesting that my wife pointed out last night. My wife has nothing to do with medicine. She's an elementary school teacher by training. She was very impressed with the number of people that were there at the event last night and impressed with the number of people that are here at this point in this meeting. And she's never been to Chateau Alon meeting, but she's been to several other meetings. She's been to Barnsley last year. And she's amazed at the amount of people and how it's grown over the last couple of years. And I really think that's a testament to our dedication for developing the breast trauma system in the state of Georgia. And whether that's a passion of yours or whether it's a necessity of yours, however you look at that, me being in South Georgia on the so-called corridor of death, as people have called it, it's a necessity, but it's also become a passion of mine. So that's one of the reasons we did this. I'm Greg Patterson. I'm one of the subcommittee chair, and my cohort back there is Alicia Register. She's eating breakfast for a good reason. Anyway, so we want to call this meeting to order. This is the GTC Level 3, Level 4 committee meeting, and thank y'all for coming. Our last meeting was back in October phone, and I need to go ahead and see if we can get an approval of the minutes that were sent out earlier. I'll take a
Motion to approve.
motion. There's a motion. Is there a second? Second, right over here. And any additions or corrections to those minutes? Any discussion? All right, seeing none. Any opposition? Hearing none, I'll say that they are passed at this point. We'll go ahead and be completed with that. I'm going to ask Liz to come up so we can do the UTC updates.
Who was it that made the first and the second? And if you could say your name, it will help Gabby.
So Alicia,
In the minutes. Okay. Awesome, thank you. We're actually going to have to set the room up for more people.
I know, this is amazing.
This is really awesome. But thank you all for being here. Don't be scared, I'm not giving all these updates for today. I wanted to make sure from my notes that I hit on a few important things I wanted to share with y'all. The most important thing is our shiny new toy over at our Department of Public Health Office of EMS and Trauma. But April Moss, if you can raise your hand, she's the new Deputy Director for Systems of Care. So in that role, she oversees trauma, stroke, and STEMI center designation. Did I get that right? All right, so please take some time to talk to April. She is just coming on board, so we've briefed her on everything with the level 4 consult visits, and she came in right after the ACS World Focus Review. Yes, so we've talked a lot about that with her. So she's all ears and wants to talk with you all about some of the challenges that we identified. So we look forward to that and working with April. A couple of things to review with y'all. The State Office of Rural Health, there's apparently another $700 worth of rural stabilization grants. They're going to be like $8 million. Yeah.
$8 million.
I think it's 8 grants or 7 grants of 850,000, just under $1 million. And there's like 55 hospitals that qualify. And many of you are on the list. And I don't have a link to share with you because I understand the grants open Wednesday, March 1st, and they'll be open for 60 days. If you're a level 3 and you participated in the readiness cost survey that we did, which by the way, we just published, so nice to actually see that.
Their own trauma. For those of you who don't know, we'll talk about that.
If you're a level 3 that participated in that, you already have pretty much what you need to submit to that grant to show, because the level 3, what was your average? Actually, would be edge.
1.3.
Yeah.
3 million.
So
the average cost in Georgia for a level 3 trauma center and 81,000 or so for level 4s.
And by the way, we know that the 81,000 is a low estimate. We definitely want to repeat that when we can quantify some more of your costs. And we know some of you have things that aren't necessarily required. Combined with the fact that the rules in the orange book transition to gray book left out the level 4s completely. But that is being worked on at ACSCOT level. There's now a true rural group, which is really comprised of rural folks as it should be, and hopefully they will get new standards published soon. So more to come on the State Office of Rural Health Grants, and we will certainly pass that information along with you. And then to go back for a minute to that ACS trauma systems consultative visit and the rural focus review that we did at Callaway and at Cartersville. First of all, thank you for so many folks that showed up for that meeting. That was great. ACS still is very impressed by our level of engagement of our stakeholders. We expect to have the report from the ACS by early April. So what we need this group to really think about is, you know, we're going to have probably an 80 or 100-page report of things that we have to work on, many of which will be specific to rural. So how do we harness the power of this group to really think about generating some solutions? Whatever you.
Keep going and talk about this.
Where's my ass? Well, you know, we don't want, it has to be led really by the stakeholder group. And if you think about it, not only do we have, and these are things that, remember, within the last 2 years, this group has brought before the commission, which is the request for the rural focus review, and then the request for the PTSF level 4 consultative visits, because the ACS doesn't have a consultative visit process for level 4. So now we're going to have all this information about, you know, opportunities. So what are the next steps? Like, how do we come together, distill what is like the low-hanging fruit? What can we fix first? And then what has to kind of go in the parking lot? And maybe we can't fix now, but we want to like keep it on our radar.
Is this time for discussion about that, or you're just throwing that out there?
A little bit of time.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time.
So are you thinking of a work group of some
So
sort?
we've got the report coming out on April 1st. Our next meeting is in May, is it not? Can't remember.
April 21st.
April 21st. Oh, wow. You-
I couldn't live without her.
So April 21st. So we get the report back in April. How are we going? The first thing is, how are we going to get copies of this report? How is it going to be made available to all members of the committee? All of you are all members of the committee, so we're trying to get, how we get a copy to every person in this room.
The ACS consultative report will post to the website.
Okay.
The level 3, level 4, or the level 4 visits I just sent to this group, okay? I can't alter that document, but technically that's a peer-reviewed document. But PTSF has locked that down because they don't want anyone changing anything about that document, so I can't put the peer review piece. So I'm just telling this group, please keep that amongst yourselves. That is a review that external professionals, physicians and nurses came and did to your centers, and that qualifies as, and our peer review attorney is actually here today, that qualifies as a peer review. So that is for your eyes only.
Right. So hopefully we'll be able to get out some type of communication, but start looking on the GTC website for a copy of the report from the ACS consultative visit by April 1st or after. And then we need to talk, and hopefully if you could review that report or at least skim over it by the time we meet for April 21st and try to dedicate a good bit of our time for that meeting to coming up with some work plans or what we need to do to start addressing some of the things, and maybe even a little bit of a survey to try to look at some things, what we want to try to do, what we want to try to park, what we want to try to, you know, really push down the road a long way down, and try to get some of those things categorized and what we can do with those in the coming future. So our next meeting after that will be at Canyon Prince in St. Simons in August. So I want to have a good bit of work going on before then if we can to try to solve some of the problems. When you meet 3 times or 4 times a year, this can get strung out in a long time, and I think we've got enough momentum over the last 2 years, which is great. I want to keep that momentum going while we have a good group, and we're continuing to add to it. That's one of the things I think is very important for us as a voice. We've been given a seat at the table. We want to capitalize on that seat at the table.
All right, so I have one more question.
Sure. Please.
So is it our responsibility to look at the level 4 report and the ACS report and try to identify like
Yes.
what things are the same? That's what our expectation.
Yes, that's what my expectations are about.
Okay. Got it.
And we'll push the report out to, also the ACS report, obviously, to the stakeholders. So you won't have to like check the website constantly, but if you're like me and you misplace email documents, the website's always a good place to go to get the documents. So make sure it's on there and we'll send it to you as soon as we get it. They will send it to us for like a 2-week turnaround. That should be coming like mid-late March, just to correct any issues or anything that they may have gotten wrong. And then we have to send it back to them. So that's what causes a little bit of the delay. And then the last thing is, I hope that many of you are going to be able to stay tomorrow, at least in the morning, for the commission meeting, because we have Etienne Proc, who's a well-known health economics researcher from Tampa, and many of you have been in the system for a long time will recall that we published a paper back in 2014, and it was a 10-year analysis of where our injured patients were going in the state. And the important piece about that was it was not registry data, so it wasn't just trauma patients, it was the discharge data set from all hospitals. So it was a really great analysis. And, Phoebe was identified through that analysis as a center that we needed to bring on board. Northeast Georgia was identified as a center that we needed to bring on board. And Phoebe's almost there, and they had an ACS consult visit, and Northeast Georgia, of course, just upgraded to level 1, so outstanding. So we hope to be able to identify other candidate centers from that, and you'll see it's very interesting, the patterns. It's all been broken out regionally as well. I think it really can be used to kind of inform us of what what lies ahead and who we potentially tap into, kind of, especially in those areas of need in regions 8 and 9, which some of you are from, and there are not a lot of centers there. Which brings me to the next item, which is really everybody's favorite item. Something that I live with every day now. We recognize that, or the commission recognizes that the funding that you all got is not enough. As a level 4, $12,000 isn't really an incentive to participate in the system. So we have, and I'm just being honest, thrown a dart at like what can we raise the level to. So we raised it an additional 25,000 on top of the 12,000. If you look at the readiness costs, and if you look at the level 1s, I think we're just under 10 million. Is that right, Dr. Ashley? I didn't think these numbers would be etched in our head. And the level 2s, we always talk about they're about 7 cents on the dollar in terms of what it costs them to be ready and what you are all actually getting in funding. And for the 3s, it's about that same ratio, but for the 4s, since we only came up with an average of 81,000, it almost looks like we're overpaying towards it. And we know that's not the case. And I think a lot of it, when you look at what the opportunities were that were found in the level 4 consultative visits, is that you probably don't have the resources that you should have. And once those are all in place, and we do a reevaluation of readiness costs, we're going to see those numbers come up. So we just picked that number to kind of go up just as a way to try to shore it up. And also recognizing that your registry stipend, the amount of money that you get, is not coming close to covering your costs. We got a list from PSO, the registry vendor, about what your facility, because now they charge talk about frustration. But anyway, we got that list about what everybody's registry costs, and we're going to match your registry costs, because the data is the backbone of everything we do. So you should never be struggling to pay for your software to get your data entered. And everybody got a grant last year to WebHost, which should greatly reduce your IT folks' effort in trying to keep your registry version up to date and push out it should really facilitate the process. If there's some barriers with your IT, and we have a lot of administrators in the room, so if there are barriers with that, we need to understand that. And if you can't use the money for that, we need to kind of talk about that. So you did get money in last fiscal year to do that. For the level threes, we've given you an additional $50,000 in readiness and matched your registry costs as well. Actual costs to what we give you. We have a list of what everybody's going to be charged. There's no perfect registry vendor out there. There's only two right now. There's one in the making. We're, for better or worse, kind of married to ESO for a few years because we invested the 1.3 million in Arbormetrics risk-adjusted benchmarking, which is critical for this group because, as you know, ACS TQIP ignores level 4s completely and doesn't do a really good job of level 3s. So we want to give you something more meaningful, and you'll hear much more about that in the next session with GQuIP. Gina will talk about that. And last night, the advisory group met, which you're part of, and talked about some process and outcome measures specific to 3s and 4s. So, much more to come. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Unless there's questions.
Any questions for Liz directly at this point? Please, this is your one time. Take a shot at it. Okay, maybe for the end of the session. I'm going to continue on with old business real quick. Courtney, I asked you to give an update on March policy.
So we've been trying to have that kickoff, that first session that we've done a good bit of work in the past. And it's been very difficult finding people getting their schedules together. So I will throw a dart at the board and I got a door behind me just in case, but I'm looking at April 28th, which is Friday, in Swainsburg, Georgia. So many of you have been on my email list, and if you have a huge conflict, let me know. If you're not on my email list and you'd like to participate and help with that, then also support me. I'll be here all day, and let me know I can show that email list. But that's the date that we're trying to do that first session. It will be a work in progress. And I think we will try to learn as much from the students as the students learn from us on how to present this material in a way that they can take it back to their hospitals. We're also working on a couple other things. We're working on developing a standardized protocol so that these rural hospitals can take it back and implement it within their center systems. We also have a rumor out there that transportation is an issue. I'm sure that's going on about. So I'm also on the state EMS advisory council. So I'm now chairing a committee to look at inter-hospital transportation. So we've been working with Lisa Hams, who y'all know me, because she's a real great asset in the State Office of Rural Health. We hope to put together a survey to send out to the rural hospitals to do two things. One, we're developing a class to train them how to take care of trauma. We don't have a clue of what equipment they have, what supplies they have. So we kind of sort of need to know that so we can focus that, but we also need to know if they don't have those things that are absolutely necessary, how can we get funding for them to get those pieces of equipment that they need. So Dean is working with us on that. So look forward.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate it. If anybody wants to volunteer to help with the March policy process, does everybody know what that is? Anybody? Courtney, why don't you give me just 2 minute blurb?
Yeah, essentially, Dr. Ashley, we've been talking about something for a long time. Dr. Ashley came up with the concept of 5 things to save a life. And then Liz and I, about the same time, tripped over the March calls algorithm. And it is a military algorithm that they use to train special ops people on how to deal with critical trauma. So we have picked up on that because a couple of things, it's the same 5 things that Dr. Ashley talked about. So that kind of meshes very well together. But the other thing is very well peer reviewed. They've done a lot of studies from Iraq and Afghanistan on how this works out. It's essentially an algorithm marches down to things that it walks down to things that are critical in taking care of critical trauma patients. I would encourage you to Google it. A lot of great articles on it. There's a lot of good information out there on it. But if you're interested in helping with it, please let me know.
Hopefully sometime over maybe over the next year to 2 years, we can roll it out to all the trauma centers. And do one of the things that you can actually help us with your referring hospitals to reach out to the next level as far as a net and kind of, cross over the entire state so that everybody's on the same page, be able to help transfer patients. And we're trying to work on that piece. This is just the stabilization piece. We have to work on other things like supplies, demographics, where we're going with the next level. Let me continue on because I want to leave a few minutes to discussion. We've already talked about the Pennsylvania Trauma Systems Foundation Level 4 consult visits. If you're a Level 4, you've had this visit. This was back in October of last year. One of the things that we fought for about a year was get funding for this. Pennsylvania and Texas have the two best that we can identify Level 4 systems in the country as far as identifying Level 4 trauma centers and certifying them on a state level, since ACS does not do that. And with ACS bringing out the new standards book last March, the gray book used to be called the orange book, the gray book now, and it left out completely Level 4 standards in that book. And so they're working on that now with the current new rural focus trauma subcommittee of the Committee on Trauma for the American College of Surgeons. So we wanted to kind of give you an idea of what what you don't know, and how you can help. Because a lot of times when you're in this position, and it's always a trickle down phenomena, you may not understand what some of the things are in the book. I don't understand some of the things in the book, and I've been doing this for a long time. So that's a problem, and what your standards are held to, we want you to be able to identify those and go on. So that was done already. It was one of the projects that we've completed with this committee. The ACS Trauma System Consult and Rural Focus Review, which Liz was talking about, another huge project that we finished in this group. I'm kind of giving you a little accolades over the last 2 years since we kind of came on scene and what we've done. And then, of course, we've also done it once. We've updated it once, access to specialty care, which we will do again in August and try to publish through QR codes and everything else available. Who is offering what things in the state. So if you have a patient, it's happened to me before. I've had a traumatic amputation at 4:30 in the morning. Who do I call? Who in the world in the state does replants at 4:30 in the morning? Who can I figure out? So it's amazing. I was able to get 2 acceptances out of 3 different centers I called within an hour. Unfortunately, weather was a problem and transportation was a problem, and we never could get that patient to any of those centers. But those are the kind of things that we need to work on in this group. One of the things that was talked about yesterday in the GQIP TQIP Executive Council meeting, which is a small group of just T&Ds, they're talking to the state head of GQIP and TQIP, and what we need to put together. And a lot of times, one of the things that we've seen is this standard practice everybody has. If you're a Level 3 or Level 4 center, you're trying to transfer somebody out. The first thing you do is you call your ready person. You call your closest friend, your closest colleague, whatever you want to call them, even a person you may not like, you call them just to deal with getting the trauma out of your door. And it takes a process. They've got their transfer center has to get them on the line, or somebody, a representative. You tell them something, then they have to hang up and call somebody else to get approval. Then they call you back, and it's been an hour. And all of a sudden they can't take them, or you can't get to that center because of transportation, or air is not flying in that direction. So what do you do then? Well, one of the things we were trying to look at was come up with a system where you really have 3 different options, and you start calling all 3 of those at the same time. And so whoever you get to call first, or whoever's got the cleanest corridor to transfer them to, things like this, so we can speed up this process and decrease the time to definitive care. So that's one of the things we were looking at for the access to specialty care. We will update that again for the August meeting, and hopefully that will become an annual thing so that we update this. And I know that John has killed me multiple times in trying to come up, and I'm working on it still to try to get a grant to come up with an app for that, so that we have a statewide GTC app that says who's on diversion, who's not on diversion for certain specialty things, ECMO, replant, neurosurgery if you don't have it available, whatever you need, they will have it on there hopefully at some point. And that's another pipe dream that we're going to work on at some point. Maybe I can squeeze some money out of the Office of Rural Health here for that, to work on that over the next year or so. And And then, of course, we've also completed the web-based registry and contracted abstraction services. Kelly, do you want to say anything about that? Or you, I know I just put you on the spot, but I didn't think about it. Everybody should be on the same system at this point. Everybody should have the same
Sure.
resource.
I know it was part of the contract that the level 3s and 4s would move forward with the ESO web-based transition. I know I can give an example from our center. For us, it's been a slow go. There's been legal back and forth. For us, we were on DI for so long that we recognized we didn't have a BAA with ESO, so we had to go through that process. And then now that we've done all of that, we're updating the contract so we can move forward. Our system is also going through an EMR transition, so our IT is pushing back quite a bit on that project. So I don't know if anyone else is having issues. I know Liz was going to reach out and find out how people were doing with moving forward with web-based. I don't know if you have any feedback on that, or if anybody here has any feedback on whether you already are web-based, whether you think it's I know the ones that are on it are really have no complaints, and so I don't think it's a problem. Anybody have it? Who has it here? You like it? You like it?
The startup was, kind of like say, just getting started up doing it was a bit of a challenge, but overall, we like it. It works well for us.
So I think the web-based is gonna come with the outcomes module, and they're gonna pre-build reports for the PRT.
Right, the report writer.
Because for some of us, which Karen? Yes, some of us have a consultative visit in September. So I
So
think the sooner we can get,
Karen and myself, probably 2 or 3 others from the same system have the same challenges you have. We realized we didn't have a BAA, we got stuck in the BAA process, we're still stuck in the BAA process, and then the steps that come after that. So we're having the same issue.
so.
It is a long process, back when I was on the, living your life every day, it took probably a good 6 to 9 months to get it up and running. It certainly wasn't easy. But yeah, once you're through that, then your updates are seamless and, but if you're, just please check and let us know if there's some barriers. Because again, funding should not be a barrier, because that was included in your AFY. Everybody got an additional bolus of money to make that happen. And one of the things that came out from the level 4 consults was that nobody had the PI module. So we want to make sure that you have the tools to succeed. And that keeps everything nice and tidy in one place. So when you have to prepare for a visit, you've got it all. And it has its own, and the report writer can access features in the outcomes module, so you can report that like numerator denominator fashion, and like the surveyors like to see when you have something that you've identified that's an opportunity in your facility that you're trying to correct. So, and actually, you're doing is it today?
Yes,
The
today.
session
Yeah.
on PI, so we can get everybody where they need to be. You and John, yes.
I know you'll probably cover it in your session this afternoon, John, but do you mind mentioning what BAA is, since I've heard that word twice now in the last 2 days?
So basically, you're having to come after all the agreements that it's all the legal aspects of using an online platform, and that's our biggest challenge.
Right.
And for us, it's protected data, so that makes it that much more
Right.
complicated.
So this is all health protected data, and you
Correct.
can have a secure line of transfer to this, from your hospital to the web-based server, so that you can have that. And it takes a bunch of time to get that established, so that it's all legally compliant. You don't want to be not within compliance with that. So that's one of the things that's holding us up as a state as well with the arborimetrics process. And that ultimately it should be solved pretty quick for us there. And it's pushed back the arborimetrics thing a couple of months. I think you've heard about so much less than that. So everybody understand what that BAA line is. It's all a secure HIPAA compliant transfer system. Any other questions on or any other comments on the web-based registry contract with abstract? So
So I know in our contract, Liz, we submitted for that money July to September. I think we got that money first quarter. So in the report out, what do we just, is there gonna be a spot? I don't remember a spot on the support card where we give you a status of where we are in that by the end of the quarter.
There's a spot.
So do we,
We can work it a different way to kind of get an update. We know the systems that are kind of having some glitches, so.
All right.
all right,
And then some of our folks in the Wellstar system, I know you all are on a different version, and we've already talked about getting you the current version with outcomes, but you're already web posted, but on a different version that doesn't include outcomes. So we're trying to figure out, and we have a placeholder for that, because again, everybody needs to be on this version.
As you can see, over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of things in this committee. And my concern is, we finally been allowed a seat at the table. We've done all these things to show our presence. We've made it, we've made our presence known to the commission and to the state that we are trying to help out as much as we can, as long as you let us play in the game. And so now that we're in the game playing, and people have our voices and people recognize you at these meetings, and they understand what you're trying to do, we need to move forward over the next 2 to 3 years or so, kind of get a 1 to 3 to 5 year action plan of what we want to do as a committee. That's what I really wanted to leave the last part of this meeting for, was things that are upcoming. You'll hear something to me that's very exciting, and to know that I was involved in trauma for a number of years, stepped away for about 6 years, and then came back. And we've been talking about web-based data and data for the state and Arbormetrics and all the stuff. We talked about this the first time I think I saw it was at the Hotel Nico, which is no longer even in existence in Atlanta, years ago, probably around 2008, maybe 2007, somewhere in there. And now it's come to fruition that we have this system for us where the level 4s can report, the level 3s can report, everybody can see all these reports across the state. And ultimately, that's what we're building with Arbormetrics. So yesterday in our council meeting, GQIP council meeting, we wanted to roll this out. It's going to be a rollout process over the next year or so. I think the start date has had to push back to September, unfortunately, because of the BAA and some other things that we're working on. But the first 2 things, we wanted to try to figure out what are the first 2 things we want to roll out to everyone. And one of the things that I said, since I'm the only level 3 or level 4 TMD on that committee, and there's 5 or 6 TMDs on that committee, was that I want something that everybody in this room can also participate in. If we do something like, AKI or some other type of issue, we may not be able to see anything with us. And I want us to be able to submit data to that and be able to participate in the Arbormetrics process from the very beginning. So the 2 things that I really stuck up for that we decided to roll out, one is time to definitive care, which is a huge process. And number 2 is hip fractures, because a lot of us will be able to do some of those things and be able to provide data for that. So that's a big deal for me from this subcommittee. So with that, we need to have some information from y'all because we don't know what we're all going to be able to do. So we got together and talked about this a little bit too from this committee, is we probably need to do another survey, or at least some type of survey among us to figure out what we all have available. Because some level 4s have orthopedics available and they can do hip fractures. Some do not. Some level 3s don't even have the ability to do hip fracture. So we need to figure out who has what. And so we're trying to come up with, the best I can come up with to make it sound interesting, was a center resources and demographic survey over the next 5 to 6 months, so that we can hopefully either report out in August, or at least have an initial study done at that point, survey done, or either report out in October or so at our next meeting, a TQIP meeting, the national TQIP meeting that we dovetail onto, about what centers have. So this, we put together first the access to specialty care. We were looking at the higher levels, what they have to offer us. Now we want to say what we all have to each other and what we have. Do we have blood available? That's one of the things we talked about this morning. Who's your nearest trauma, what are your trauma centers that you refer to? What is your availability of provider in the ER? Do you have a physician, mid-level, what? We won't know who is who until we figure out what everybody has. And so that's what we want to put together over the coming months. And I'd like, that'll help us out in the ACS consultative visit. It'll also help us to try to start planning some of the data points for that time to definitive care process. So what you're going to have to be involved in the time to definitive care, you're going to have to be providing data to the referring center because they're going to be putting data into the computer for arbormetrics to get it back. So we're going to need certain data, like when the patient arrived at your facility, when they left your facility. Those are obvious things. But what was the kind of, what other data do we want to supply? When were they accepted? When did you determine that they needed to be transferred? What time? What kind of treatment did they get? Another thing is a lot of the level 4s may not have blood available. And so how are you treating hypotension at that point? What are you treating? Are you actually over treating with crystalloid and creating some problems down the line? So these are all questions we want to try to help answer with this demographic survey and what we can do. Maybe this will help us come out and get some extra grant money to help fund you to get a blood bank or something in that resource. So that's what we're trying to look at with this. I'd like to open it up for some discussion to try to put together some of the initial points we want to start looking at for the demographic survey. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about March Falls, and I'm thinking about how the whole goal behind March Falls is to go to those smaller centers and learn what resources they have and learn. So if we create this demographic, then as March Falls expands and grows, we'll be able to have that document to look and see, okay, this is what we're thinking. And I know from our perspective, we are a 3, but we do get patients from other centers, and some of the ER physicians a lot of times will get upset because why are they sending us this? This doesn't make sense. But then you have to explain, well, they don't have CT after 11 o'clock at night. These people don't have, they have to call in a lab person.
Right.
And there's a 4-bed ER. So I think if we build this among trauma centers, it'll increase awareness of what capabilities are around. And also maybe if we share that with 1s and 2s, it'll prevent those questions
Right.
that we get to.
So my other piece of that, working with Nita Ham, she can bring in, we're the folks, don't mean to sound trite here, but it's not the people in the room here that I'm particularly worried about. It's
Sure.
people who are not in the room because they don't recognize the need, they don't recognize that they've got a problem. So she can reach out to all of them because they get money from her, and so they didn't pay attention to her. So maybe the survey I was talking about a while ago, we just rounded it into one survey and let her send it out to all the hospitals and get to everybody at one hit.
Sure.
Do you think she would be able to put that resource list together? Could we task her with that?
I'm sorry.
Could we task her
Sure.
with trying to?
Well, she has tasked us with coming up with questions. Sometimes that, quite frankly, sending out is not that difficult, but figuring out how to ask the right question, get the true answer. And the other thing that I know this is going to come as a shock to you, sometimes they won't tell you the truth.
Right.
So you got to make sure that it's one that they're anonymous because they don't want to say, I can't do this. But if you also tell them, say, hey, if you can't do it, and we know that, and we can help you with funding and training to focus on that.
Right.
That's where I'm trying to get. I want to know the truth. If they don't have a blood warmer and they're running cold blood, that's not possible.
Right.
Or if they got a blood warmer and it's up in OR, and it takes them an hour to get it down and get it set up. Well, that's not what they need.
Okay.
I think Kelly had a good point about sharing it with the level 1s and level 2s, which sort of ties into the comment I was going to make at the end. It was obvious through the Pennsylvania review that we needed a mentorship program or a relationship program between the level 1s and 2s or whatever's in your region and the 3s and 4s. And so I think what needs tied into Mark Paul's and the survey and your comments about who got called at 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
Really, and there's already work going on, I think. It's correct if I'm wrong, GCTE about matching up some hospitals. So like in our region, Tracy Johns, we want to make sure that, my vision would be for our region to make sure that we have monthly calls. So that I know exactly what's going on. I know John or Sally at the other institution. And if we do a monthly call, I can say, you transfer me 3 patients. We can go over that, do a little low-level PI. With the Mark Tall, this is sort of what worked, what did, we could improve in this area. And then give them a chance to ask me how we receive the patient. Because sometimes if I get a new attendant that doesn't know the rules, they may be slow to accept the patient or ask too many questions. Because we like to just say, send the patient and don't ask too many questions. And so I think that relationship needs to be built, and we're committed to doing it. And I think all the 1s and 2s are. So what you're talking about is very important, but the 1s and 2s, we have to do our part to line up with what you're doing. So all these things will work better if we're starting to have those frequent calls.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
One thing I think to include on the survey would also be your transport resources.
Right.
One of the biggest issues from the Pennsylvania survey was, or their recommendations was about transport needs, transfer to hospitals. So, questions regarding that, what are your resources? How do you typically transfer, and what percentage of time do you get them out by your goal?
Yes, sir.
I believe that one of the issues that was raised with regards to the apprehension that centers might be experiencing, to just be transparent and the truth.
Right.
A big issue, because if what you get back is not solid, is not reliable, then it throws everything on kilter.
Sure.
So just looking at that aspect of it and helping centers and leaders to be to understand that it's not your fault why things are the way they are, but we are here to work with you to make sure that we all get to the same place together, is a big issue in resolving what we now have.
Right.
I think most of our problems are going to be aligned, and we would be able to articulate the problem together, making sure that we are looking at the same goal, rather than have outliers and get up to the top and realize, oh my God, this is not really where we should be going.
Yeah.
Anything else? Just a small point to add to all that. We did something like this in Region 1. We got everybody bringing all their capabilities together. And the thing that kind of caught us in the background was 3 months later, everybody's capabilities changed.
Right.
So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Right.
They change constantly.
Right. So I understand this is going to be different than what we would ultimately come up with. I think Kelly's committee for registry is coming up with a list of data points that would ultimately have to use to transfer a patient to another center, so that we can maintain the Arbometrics report on time to definitive care. That's extremely important to identify the problems, because a lot of times it may be a problem with us. We may be repeating a CT scan that we don't need, or some other aspect based off a virtual radiology. It's always, I had somebody the other night do a study, another study on a C2 fracture, because they were worried about a vertebral artery injury, when the real problem was they forgot about the active blush that was going on in the pelvis. So they called me 2 hours later with the patient in hypotension. I'd never even heard anything about the patient at that point. And so now I'm trying to get interventional radiology, spooled up, and all these other issues. So this is dirty laundry, and we have to understand that airing that dirty laundry is the only way that we're going to be able to improve. But it's not, and that's another topic that's coming up for discussion. Hopefully, out of the council, that I'll mention in just a minute, is about airing dirty laundry and trying to learn from that dirty laundry. So what I want to put together is a survey, and I think we ought to do it real quick for the level 1s or the level 3s and 4s. Hopefully have that reported out by August meeting. So we need to have some data points. If you will submit data points to me, you can hand them to me on a piece of paper if you want to, or whatever you think, or to Kelly, even talk to us after this meeting about what we think we ought to include on that. Blood bank's a big deal, what your ER sizes, your ER resources as far as providers and nurses, what services you have available and when you have them available, so we can all put this together. I think it does need to be done on a statewide process, and maybe this can be the first run and try to put together what numbers you need for your committee and ultimately do every hospital in the state. But I want to be able to do that, to share it with the level 1s and 2s like we talked about, but also have the next level of what we're doing. If we figured out the basic costs of what we think now, figure out our resources, what we have available, what we want, what we need for based on the ACS guidelines or whatever guidelines we come up with for the level 4s until the ACS has those. And then ultimately in 5 years, redo all our cost surveys and see where we're at, so that the commission has an idea of what money they need to ask for from the state legislature. That was kind of my proposal at this point. Any other comments related to that? See where I'm doing on time. Got 13 more minutes. Alicia, you have anything?
No, I think that this survey for the resources and demographics is gonna be really helpful and is really gonna make a big impact over the next couple of years. Kind of like the readiness cost survey did, and then it led into the different consult visits, and I think we're gonna see a similar outcome from this.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the biggest thing is trying to, is the survey that we're getting, trying to see how we can decrease length of stay by moving a patient from a level 4 to another level 4, if they potentially have the resource. For example, if there's a hip fracture and I'm calling around and trauma centers are overwhelmed, or the most common thing that they do say is this not major trauma enough to qualify for this transfer. The biggest thing would be to try to get them someone that is orthopedic, especially if they've already been hand scanned in that situation. So a survey like this, which clearly states that the resource that each facility has, and hopefully we can get in some sort of, this is a family, hopefully we can get in some sort of relationship where we're willing to accept those isolated injuries that potentially is increasing the length of stay in those places.
That's interesting.
Well, it kind of goes back to what the whole field triage criteria is for EMS. Not every patient needs to go to level 1. And so if we have these isolated, we need to start, because I have not thought about that.
Right. That was another thing that we wanted, that we talked about yesterday in the GTIP council meeting, was not every hospital has the same, is utilizing the same triage criteria, and they don't have triage criteria, they may not even have triage criteria. So they just get a trauma in, they don't even know about it, they don't even try to set up for it at that point, and ultimately, they don't know, what the physiologic criteria is, what the current criteria is. They're still using the field criteria for years ago. So all these things, or what are we using? That's another thing we ought to include on the survey. I forgot about that, was actually what criteria they are using for their triage. And we ultimately also wanted to look at over and under triage rates for those centers, and based off what they're using, try to figure out if there's a better way that we all can do this. The other thing I did want to mention while we have a few more minutes is the mentor program. And the mentor program, there's one coming out through the GTCE. Which Kelly, I think maybe talked about too, is the trauma program directors and registrars in the state. Looking at a mentor program that matches people up. The other thing that I wanted to do is not only just mentors, someone who's supposedly maybe a higher level of yours that you can have an established relationship with, but another center that you're matched with, or 2 centers that you can talk to that are the same level as you, so you can talk about your ongoing problems. Just like your friend, you may have a mentor that helps you outside your parental relationship when you're growing up, but also your friends you use to bounce things off. Your best friend, your BFF, if you will. We have a BFF and mentor program, so we can talk to each other. Are you experiencing this problem with the Arborimetrics, or how do you do this? Who do I need to call in the state to get this looked at? So trying to come up with some type of program so that we're just a little bit more connected than we are every 4 months or 3 months when we come to these meetings and sit down together at that point so we can call. Any thoughts on that? Any ideas that people already are using, relationships that they already have, so we can put together some kind of model here within this committee itself? I mean, I know for a fact I can pick up the phone and call Alicia Register without question She may be in an operating room, but she's gonna return my text or my phone call. Some other time we can ask a question. And hopefully, as Albany comes online, which is in between us, we will establish a relationship with them so that we can all call and maybe even establish a monthly call. You know, like John was talking about, so we can talk about things among ourselves, which we're all in the same RTAC region. We tried to revamp our RTAC as well. That's another thing I think we need to look at inside this committee is our presence within the RTACs themselves. Some people have great RTACs in the state, some people do not. So where do we need to go with this?
So I think from a coordinator's perspective, if you're a coordinator here, Tracy is heading that up, but it's basically exactly what he said. And if you've been involved in the coordinators, it can be an isolated feeling because no one else in the organization understands what you do but you, because you're the only one. So I've always called that group my support group, like my little Al-Anon. I've said that for 20 years. So if you, the idea here is to basically, like he just said, you're not paired with a 1 or 2 who doesn't really understand what you're going through. You're going to be paired with a 3 or a 4 that can relate to the same situations or issues you have. And there are times you may reach out to someone else, but I do think that that's going to be moving forward. You're going to have like the Big Brother program, like we talked about, from a, I need to transfer this patient, how do I get them? But then you're going to have a mentor, which is going to be, how do we do this in this organization?
Or to talk about consultative visits. Some of us are rapidly coming up on them, or site visits, or whatever we need to do. How did you get through this process? Or this reviewer was really touched on this type process. So it'll help us out tremendously. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking from my personal experience related to that level 3 and level 4 group that Tracy initiated, I have been able to grow relationships, and I'm at a level 4 over in LaGrange, so you know, the west side of the state. So I've been able to build relationships with Tracy over at Macon, and then also with Lynn Grant, and Christy Mathis, like at other facilities. And so I've been able to make those connections with not only a higher level, level 1, but level 3s, level 4s as well, to be able to bounce ideas off of, call up for questions and things like that. So just to reiterate, what Kelly was saying, it's very beneficial in building those relationships amongst the coordinators and having that support group, if you will, and that's exactly what we kind of call it.
Sure.
And we've already had a couple of meetings where good things have come out of it. So one of the biggest opportunities was how to build our PI programs within level 3s and level 4s.
Yep.
And so John's going to be putting together something for us, and we're going to talk about that later on today. It's already been.
Right.
So lots of good things are getting come out of this group.
That's probably the biggest thing lacking right now in level 3s and 4s is the PI process, the PI program, it's universal.
Absolutely.
Because some people don't even know what a PI process is, and that's not their fault. It's hard to kind of wrap your hands around until you see a project sometimes, and you can kind of figure out what's going on with that. Any other things anybody else wants to talk about? This is a special time for us to get together as far as the level 3s and 4s and talk about anything that we feel like we need to work on. Because we do have some momentum. I do want to keep this going. I do want to keep that seat at the table. Anything about the commission I need to worry about? Forget that Dr. Ashley's in the room. Or several of the commission members are in the room. Courtney, Liz.
I would just like to say, Greg, just from the commission standpoint, as a volunteer, as a commission member, I'm gonna speak personally, I can speak for the whole commission, I think they feel the same way. This is one of the most important committees that I see for the commission. For what? There used to not even be a room, let alone one person in the room.
Right.
And look at the size of the room now and where y'all come from, and people are starting to talk the same language. So this is the next frontier. What you all are doing here is incredibly important. Lives will be saved because of this group. And so the things that you talked about today seem hard, and they are hard. And I want John Kennedy, President Kennedy's one of my favorite books, when we were trying to go to the moon, he said, we elect to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And so March Paul's doing what you're talking about doing, starting to mentor, starting to work, relationships. This is not easy, but this is where lives will be saved because we'll increase our efficiency. The care in the ER will get faster, like the NASCAR team. And the patients that are really, really critical will get to the level 1s and 2s faster. The ones that can stay at your facility will stay there and get good care, and patients won't have to be transferred out. So this is a very important committee, and I think you're on the right track, and I appreciate Greg and Alicia and also that are serving on the behind the closed doors and doing all the work. So thank you very much from the commission standpoint.
Anybody else, any other comments? We got two other things I was reminded of. One of the things that the council has talked about is one of the prospects that was brought up, and it was brought up last year at Barnsley, and it's been mentioned again, is the concept of teletrauma, just like teleneurology, strokes. Trying to come up with some way to look at that, and it has to be a collaborative process between the higher levels and the lower level trauma centers, and how we can set up a system. And hopefully we'll be able to breach this subject again and probably come up with some kind of pilot program. But one of the things that was brought up about time to definitive care is when you're at a level 4 trauma center or a level 3 trauma center, and you don't have an available resource that you need, and that patient has that injury, an isolated injury in that area, let's say a head injury, and you just need a follow-up with someone as far as the neurosurgery. You may not necessarily need to transfer that patient, but at least establish a known follow-up so you can discharge that patient from your ER and they have somewhere else to go if they need to. That's one of the things we're hoping to solve with the teletrauma. So we can call, get that available resource on the line, have them look at a scan, if it's just a small tiny little bit of blood on a CT, and it's not changed, and you watch the patient and everything's fine, then you can send that patient out and feel comfortable that you've done the right thing medical, legally at that point. That's one of the things we want to breach the subject of, and how we can get that and have you a follow-up put on that chart that's not lingering out in space. Is that something that you can use, that you would possibly agree to? Okay, I'm gonna start trying to work on that over the next couple of meetings. The other thing is airing dirty laundry. I mentioned that before. We got 2 minutes to go, and I'll try to keep it to that. Is that one of the things we're going to try to do in August is air some dirty laundry prior to the homecoming of Arbormetrics in September. And one of the things we agreed to yesterday was that we would try to present at least 4 cases in data, unblinded data about problems that we've had, and each center would take one of these. That would be, there would be a level 1 trauma center presenting, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. Hopefully would present a problem they have. It may not be something as far as death, but a problem with transporting, or a problem with getting acceptance, or some type of problem that you're having, so we can put this together so that we can see how these reports would ultimately change your lives. And that would be unblinded data, and you would have to agree to present this yourself. I've already volunteered my center just because. That's just, I'm a firm believer in that we're not going to make any headway unless we figure out what we did wrong and then turn it into what we can do right. And one of the things that we will hopefully do at the August meeting, we'll bring back the process of a closed meeting by invitation only, if you agree to, not disclose anything outside that meeting, because this is a PI project, and ultimately come to that meeting to hear the airing out of dirty laundry and unblinding the TQIP report so that we can see what everybody else is doing. I don't know that you're doing something right, and so I may need to call and establish that mentor relationship with you to figure out what you're doing with AKI, or how you're getting people transferred out so damn quick. Who are you paying off? Tell me what I need to do. Okay? And so those are the things that we need to ultimately come up with so we can help. So hopefully that will help us out. It is 8:30. I wanted to end right there. Any other final comments? And we can go on. We got 15 minutes before the next session starts. Thank you all very much for the time you dedicated to this. I really appreciate it.